So this is a bit of an experiment, really. I recorded this video, obviously, and it starts off with "Welcome to Yorkshire Classic Cars Limited" on another sunny day in Retford. Please see the merch. Um, and basically, I was recording the next stage of getting ready to put the sills and everything on the Austin 1100. Unfortunately, for some reason, the sound doesn't seem to have worked. So when I've done it, the sound hasn't recorded on my device. So what I thought I'd do is, if I could record this as an audio clip and then try and lay it over the top, which I've never done before, but I'm fairly sure I can. You can also see that the microphone isn't switched on if you look closely at the picture. I don't know what I'm muttering on about. I can't remember. However, I do bring you down and show you that actually in the meantime, I've actually done all the inner floor sections, as you can see there. I'm putting the torch down to try and show you the near side corner where I'd seam welded it together to the inner wheel arch. What I had to do here to chase the rust away was to cut along the edge of the floor along the previous repair, because it's actually rusted down the edge of that where it had been welded. The rest of the floor was absolutely super solid. And I made it in two sections purely because I wasn't sure I was going to approach underneath the cross member, which is what I'm pointing to now. You can see it's an L shape. I hadn't ground any of it back. I'd just gone into it and welded it all together to install the strength back into the device. If you look to the left, so where the cutting disc is there on the floor, you can see that I've done it all the way down. This is, well, it's not an attempt. This is how I retain the strength in the vehicle, because the next stage is to actually cut the inner sills out. Now, if you look absolutely under the torch now, you can see a piece of metal that I've put up underneath rather than on top, and that's so as I could get under the cross member without removing it all. The more strength you remove out of a chassis, the more risk there is of losing the form and shape. And obviously with no sills, no inner sills, I had to be very, very careful with this car. You can see some burn marks in the sections there. I do a small section at a time, so as I'm not cutting a huge amount of strength out. So I put a little piece in, and in between there, where you can see my middle finger now is touching, that is a butt weld. So that's buttered together, and that will then grind absolutely flat on there. But the cover panel underneath will sandwich that together when it's all finished. So that's what I was doing there. You can see that the original repair section was a bit ridiculously large. And you can see the marks there above my hands where it's clean. Well, those are the original welds where it was. Those were welded to originally. There's obviously no rot there. I've put the section in at the back, the box section, that's all in, where the cross member goes across, and I'm actually leading into starting the sill repairs on the inner sill. Now, again, I do this to section at a time, and this is how I was taught to do it when I worked at Yorkshire Triumphs, purely because if I take all that section out in one go, it's going to remove tons of strength. So you can see into the left there, just in shot, the sill, the cover sill, and the inner sill is still all there. And I'm putting a tiny overlap again for strength, and I'm just stitching down that, seam welding down that all the way. And then again, butt weld down the middle there. And then what I will do is grind it all back absolutely smooth again so you can't see it, and paint up all under there. But I like to keep that butt weld there, because obviously if you put an overlap there, when you put your sill in and your cover panel together, it's not going to fit together nice and square and flat. You'll end up with little gaps in it, and you want to avoid all those gaps as much as possible, not only for strength but for ingress of moisture and rot and things. It was only about the bottom sort of inch of the inner sill that was actually rotted away on this car, and that's some reasonably thick steel I've put in. As you can see, I've cut the next section as I've gone along, and I always cut further than I'm going to weld to, but not significantly further in this case, obviously, as you can see. And I've tried to retain the pressings there if they were solid enough, so you can see the circle there pressed into the inner sill, about 6 inches to the left of that mole grip. And they are strength pressings. They stop deformity in the panel. So those are there. You can see now the cover sill. There was actually two, on both sides actually, two closing panels and two cover sills. The rubber bung there is the original sill. And as you can see down the edge, it wasn't rotten. The very, very edge of that original sill was rotten there. Look, you can just see it to the centre of the screen there. That's actually the rot that they've covered up with the cover sill. if it was me and that was my car, I'd have unpicked the bottom edge of the sill and I'd have rolled an L-shaped section and welded it in all the way down the bottom there, and cut down there and just put a section in all the way. I'm not a big fan of repairing sills, but to be honest, for that small amount of rust, I really, really wouldn't have gone to the whole effort of putting a cover sill in and ruin the alignment of the car. Of course, when you put cover sills on, that ingresses water and you get sort of moisture forming in between the two panels. And of course, when you weld, however much you prime, when you weld, you're obviously going to cause oxidization in there, and it will burn the paint off. It has to. So I've got that all clamped in, as you can see. That's all ready to go. The little bottle jack underneath was where I was pushing the floor sections up to make sure they stayed nice and level to the originals. You can see the gap there underneath the door. There's no gap at all. It's probably only about 1.5 millimeters, and that is because they've put the cover sill over the top of the sill there. Now under that is absolutely rust free. The top of the sill was fine, the door frame was fine. So what I elected to do there, you'll see later on, is cut that off flat, so remove the lip as it welds down, and cut the new sill so it's slotted in underneath, and align the edge and then seam weld all the way along it. But of course I painted all this, did all the grinding painting and stuff underneath before I did all that. Seam sealer where it was required, but obviously there wasn't much required inside. I did inside the car at the end, obviously. So I'm just getting ready here to weld that in. Nice strong piece of steel, obviously cut back. You can see I've cleaned it up, and I've cut back to where the seal is definitely solid. I don't sort of try and save as much of the original car as I can by welding into rust. I keep it, I want good, fresh, solid steel. Now, if you look across the top here where I'm sort of pointing at, that's where it's been brazed. It was brazed roughly. You can see one just to the right there where the door pillar ends. And then it was brazed about every 6 to 8 inches all the way along. And there weren't great brazes. Some of them had actually taken really well. A lot of them were very bad. And underneath that, weirdly, there was like a seam of body filler, which was very, very bizarre. But of course, the moisture had ingressed into there and it caused all sorts of damage. Hence, I'm having to do this job in the first place. The sills I was supplied with were actually for a 2-door. And as you can see where the B pillar comes down there was actually a little bit of a sort of an indentation there for that B pillar, which the 2-door ones didn't have. That was the other reason I elected to seam weld all the way down the edge. But you'll see what I did with that later on, because I did another video. Luckily, the audio's worked on the other videos. But you can see I'm unpicking it as we go along, and I'm getting it ready to weld in there. Nice high current, good burn through. You can see it on both sides. Obviously, you can't in this image, I appreciate, but you can actually see on the inside of that it's all really well burnt through, and a really, really, really strong weld. It makes it one piece, I leave extra material to the bottom of that inner sill. You can see it extends down past, you can see on the left there where the original sill is. And it extends down probably about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch, some places about 1 inch. That's just a safety margin, because obviously the new sills may not align with the old sills. So once I've spot welded it all together, I can then cut that off flush with the bottom, and it makes a really, really nice, neat finish, rather than trying to alter the new panel to fit something because you've cut it in the wrong place. So nobody, it doesn't matter about putting extra material in there. I'm going to get rid of that eventually anyway. It's always better to put a little extra in, because it's a lot easier to remove with the angle grinder later than it is to actually weld little fillets in here and there. I'm not saying I never have to do that, but if you can avoid it, it's significantly better. The sill goes on the front there, as you can see. It's quite a hard sort of profile to explain. And then the closing panel goes behind the inner sill, on the same seam as the outer sill, so it ends up 3 seams thick there. Again, hence why I didn't want to overlap in the edges there. It was important. But if you butt welding very fresh steel to
the Austin 1100, I got in the zone a little bit, and since then I've finished the whole job. There is a tiny weeny little bit of welding left, and a little bit of grinding back to do, and then just a coat of paint on the inside. So just to show you, basically, that is the offside sill fitted. You'll notice here, if I zoom in, you can see the gap there. That's the gap that there should be under the door. It's actually a little larger than it should be. It needs to come down a tiny bit because it's been moved up so far. You can see there that there was a cover sill and cover wheel arch fitted. You should still be able to see, if I shine the torch up under there, you should still be able to see there's an inner arch and an outer arch there. Hopefully you can see that. So the door is really super tight to that and loose to that. That is, this sill I have mounted to the original doorstep. So, further to what I was talking about when I said I was going to do it, you can see here the brazers there where somebody has brazed it on. And you can see along the edge there, hopefully, I fully seam welded it down there and ground it back and put the radius back in there. Now, I appreciate in places it's a little bit where it's spat a little bit and stuff. I was struggling with my welding torch and I have bought a new one now. Those there are a couple of spot welds upon to locate it. Those have all been ground back and it will just need a small skim of filler along there. Probably could do it with a primer filler, a high build primer, but to be honest, I'd just put a very slight skim of filler down there. And if I take you around the other side and open the door without it catching the floor, I've put a tiny weeny skim of filler on there just while the door was off. It's not easy to make it out really with the red oxide primer on there. But that's just, I did that just so the owner doesn't have to take the door off necessarily again, although I think he will have to, mostly due to the wing being a little bit misaligned. I think the wing's going to have to come off, quite honestly. However, that's just to show the difference between there where I've ground back and there where I've just put the first, just one block of filler, one slight rub off just to smooth it over. And that just sort of shows the finish that you're looking to achieve. And just to show the owner that that's the image, the finish it should get. I need to make a shim to go behind that door, hinged now, to lower this door back down to where it should be. It does shut nicely. So that's the side you were on with before. This is the side I've just finished. I've literally just painted it up underneath. So you can see the inner sill repair I did there along the bottom edge of the sill. I've scribed a line down the edge of the bottom of the sill there and welded a section on there and then cut it back. That continues up inside of there, where I welded it up there, repaired the heel board on this side. You should be able to see down in there, the heel board repair. However, this side I did without cutting the rear cross member out because it wasn't as rotten at this side. Don't know how it's going to look on the camera. I'm quite pleased with it, but you can see there the floor repairs I've done, sealed and painted. These parts here somewhere are the spot welds from where I've tied the subframe, the crossmember back in. I've rolled it around the back like I did on the other side and then ground it nice and smooth to there. That's all seam sealed in. This is just the first coat of primer and it's still wet, hence why it looks a bit weird and patchy. You can see the closing panel there all the way along, tied into the back of the sill and the inner sill. The sill is spot welded on from this side, from the side you're looking at. The closing panel is spot welded on from the other side, and then it's just a bead of sealer wiped over it with my finger after I've ground back all those welds. The floor edges are all repaired all the way along. Okay, quite a large floor repair there. I've forgotten to grind off 2 spot welds there. You can see those need to come off tomorrow. And there's a couple further forward as well that I've forgotten. That's where I repaired the cross member in the middle. Smear of sealer. The closing panel is spot welded along the floor edge as it should be. I think they were pattern parts because they didn't go on quite as nicely. But yeah, so you should be able to see, you can see here, if I put the light down, you can see here where I've cut that off and I've blended it in further along when I've put the floor sections in inside. I can assure you with a nice coat of anti-stone chip and or underseal over the top of that. This is all underseal that's under there. That would look absolutely lovely. Personally, I might advise the customer to this, to be honest, if he wants me to do it, but I would under seal to this seam here, and then paint this section, or anti-stone chip or under seal to here, and then paint that section, because you do see that curve once it's on the cat. Right, if I go to the front and show you what I've done there on this side. Just close the door. As you can see, they all closed properly because nothing's moved. I've repaired all the closing sections on the front. So I've made a new closing section to go up there. I've made a seamed piece. You can see there's a seam. All that's as per original. That's all tied in underneath. The vent hole in the front there. I've made a new section to go in there, in the front of the inner wheel arch. Sealed and painted up to there. Again, it's just original under seal above. Really depends what the customer wants to do. If he wants to scrape all that off and stone chip it, that's up to him. That's spot welded through and sectioned in underneath. Sorry, it's a bit patchy and shiny, so it doesn't look as good as it will when it's all gone dull and negative. You can see there's no gaps. If I take you inside the car, I actually should have taken some shots of this before I sealed it up, because it did look nicer then. Yeah, I've used a little bit of white seam sealer I had left. As you can see, that section there where I've repaired the cross member there, that's the seam there. Going to here. Okay. Same on this side as the other side. This floor is actually quite rough. There are a few holes in it. You can probably see one there if I shine the torch up underneath. So what I've done is I've repaired this section of the floor. And then if the owner wants to put new floors in, he's got a good section to tie to, so he can weld to this section I've put in. That's seamed down here, seamed into the corner, proper lip put on the outside. Repaired all the cross member here. Hoping you can see that in the corner there. Nice smart repair in there. Look better once it's painted. Obs. Again, all the way down here. All the floor edges repaired. Ground back, all repaired, all the way down. Fabricated and put in. Section put in the end of the cross member there, but the rest of it was pretty good. And a new edge put on that. So there you go. That's the repair all done. It's a bit of a mess at the other side, sorry about that. You can see that's all sealed up too in pink, pretty in pink. A little bit of black sealer there at the back, or I've just put some on. Just had a little bit left to grind off there. That's all done. So tomorrow's job, final job, it says leaning against the paint, donkey. There's a tiny little bit of welding to do. Show you that here. Tiny little bit of welding and grinding to do left to do there. This is just where the brazing is here, and that bit was the only little bit of rust in the whole inner sill on the doorstep. So you can see where I've seam welded it all the way down the edge. I'll just grind that back. I've got the thingy out there, you know what? Can't remember what you call it, check strap removed. Just got to whip those 6 screws out. Can't adjust the rear doors yet, purely because they still have a little bit of old cover arch over the top of them. But yeah, I'll clean that edge up and put a little bit of liquor paint on there for the owner. So yeah, just that to do tomorrow. Get everything a really, really good paint round. All this corner's in, you saw that before, but it's all ground back now. You can see the arch repair in the back there. I haven't sealed that purely because, as you can see, there's still rust holes in that arch. So if the owner wants to cut again, use that as a good repair start there. Obviously there is where I've welded across. But there's a little hole there. I don't know if that's a mounting hole or a rust hole, but there's definitely a rust hole above it. So he can cut that across there and put a new section in, but I don't know if new sections are available. And the job I was asked to do was just to tie up the car and make it strong again with new sills, inner sills and floors. And then the rest of the customer wants to do himself. So I'll draw. So I'll draw the video to a close. Thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. The fabrication's really gone really well on it, actually. Some of it doesn't look as neat in those pictures as it actually does when you see it, but it's come out pretty well. It's certainly a good, strong basis to carry on. Yes, it would have been better with full new floor sections in, but the rear sections weren't that bad. The only really bad section is the front driver's side, but that's up to the customer if he wants to buy a piece to repair in there. They're not exactly cheap and they're not exactly commonplace. Okay, so draw close there. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Give us a like, give us a comment, give us anything you like, really. Send me one of them there thingies where you pay for a coffee. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.